beautiful opportunity as we come to the end of the month of September.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Feel most welcome.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, viewers and listeners from wherever you are. I'm glad to be here again. You are aware that we started a program on psycho-spiritual, and I really spoke really largely on that, trying to marry the two, the psychology and also the spirituality. Because these are two elements in our lives that we cannot do without. And so it's very essential that we speak about them. But today, I'm particularly focusing on identity as the cause, but also remedy for mental wellness and spiritual stability. What that means is, I'm using so many terminologies there, but I will really try to be as simple as I can in a way that every one of you who is listening can actually understand. Now, I have come to this point because of my work. When I'm doing work, when I'm counseling people, when I'm listening to people, when I'm doing training, there's one constant phrase, statement that I hear. And I will hear people say things like, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of being alive? I feel like I'm rejected. I feel worthless. I feel like life has no meaning. I feel like I'm burdened. So when I hear all these statements, I just know that someone is already in crisis. And this crisis is not crisis of the physical crisis. Maybe what we would say something like people are fighting in Mao Forest, and so there is a crisis there. This is an internal crisis. And this internal crisis is not just internal organs. It is a crisis of identity. That means someone is already struggling to understand who they really are and what is their purpose in this world. And so I thought maybe it's important I really speak about it in a way that so many of us are able to understand the importance of our identity. And so that when our identity is intact or stable, then our mental well-being will be stable. And of course, our psychological, spiritual perspective too will be stable. So let me begin by defining identity. And I will not use really very serious psychological terminologies. I will just put it in a very simple way. When we talk of identity, we are referring to who you really are. Who you really are, not what you have, not what you do. Because oftentimes I hear people, I ask them, who are you? And the very first thing that we are, I'm Silas Krinya, I'm a counseling psychologist, I'm married, I go to church and whatever, all that. It's important to have that as part of trying to define yourself. But the question is, if I was taken away from the church, will I still be Silas? If my name was changed, I go to Japan or China, and then they call me Jack Chang or something like that. So will I still remain the same person, or will I be something different? If today I'm married and probably something happens, God forbid, and then I'm not married anymore, so will I still remain to be Silas? If I am a psychologist today, and for whatever reason, God forbid, my license is taken and I cannot practice, will I still remain Silas? If I am defining myself as a wealthy man, if that wealth is lost, will I still remain to be the same person? If I define myself as a very intelligent person, and then somewhere along the way something happens and I'm not performing as much in school, will I still remain the same person? So these are questions that each and every one of us need to ask so that we are able to know exactly who we are. Because I have journeyed with couples. From the beginning, they come together. I mean, a man and a woman, and I journey with them. And in the process, they say, no, we can't go, the same path, because our ideas, our values, our belief system, our identity is totally different from each other. And so they separate. And the next time I see them individually. And when I'm seeing an individual person, they are saying, I am a single. So is single really your identity? Or is this something that you have acquired along the way? So that's why we need to have this conversation today, so that together we are able to strengthen our identity. Now, to begin with, I will say, if I ask you what is your identity, I know you might not be able to respond to that question. I know honestly you might not be able to answer me. Because what are you going to say if I ask you what is your identity? I really want you to take a second and just ask yourself, what is my identity? If someone asked you, how would you respond to that? You'll come to realize that the only way to be able to know who we really are is exploring our values. And that's why I put in values there. Is exploring our values. Because I trying to check every other thing that we go through, every other thing that we possess, every other thing that we do, and I notice there's nothing that can really help us define who we truly are. And the only thing that I was able to find is the values. Why values? Because values subsist. Maybe I should start by defining values. So values, in the simplest way that every one of us can understand, it is that which makes you do what you do. It is that which determines how you do what you do. In other words, it is part of your belief system. It is that which subsists. Subsist means, basically, it is the one that is with you through and through. For example, you can say life subsists within you. That means wherever you go, there is life going with you. You don't leave your life behind and then you move on with life. So you have to carry your life wherever you are. As if at all we are going to talk about you as a person. So values also subsist. Let's look at values like, for example, I am honesty. Maybe I'm hardworking. So if you're hardworking, it does not mean you're hardworking only when you're doing this particular work or employment, let's say in this case. No, if you're hardworking, you're hardworking wherever you are. Hardworking if you're in the shamba, hardworking if you're taking care of your children, whatever it is that you engage into, you realize actually you are very hardworking. Why? Because hardworking for you, it is not something that is determined by the environment. It is something that is determined by who you really are. So the moment you appear, hardworking appears with you. If you're a person of integrity, it does not matter how much you are faced with all the corruption and bribes and all that, you will still remain a person of integrity. Because integrity is not something that you possess when you get into a certain environment. It is something that is with you through and through. You cannot fly right now, you go to US, and then your values are lost along the way. You go with them. And so that's why then we use values to define your identity. But then the problem is this, that some of us have picked negative values along the way, and we have used that to define our identity. So what kind of identity will you have, or will I have? I will have a negative identity. Let me give just a small example of my own life. Growing up, I had a lot of struggles in many ways, but one of the areas that I struggled a lot is my relationship with my father. And this is simply because my dad was alcoholic and my dad was violent and many other things that probably I'm not mentioning at the moment. Now, as a young man growing up, I looked at a dad who ashamed me because he would drink and some people pick him from the trench in the morning and bring him home. And he looks dirty and everything else. I go to school and my other children, they just tell me, hey, Silas, we saw your dad on the road. And this really would affect me a lot. And so growing up as a young man, I grew up with values like, I am good for nothing. I grew up with values like, I am not worthy much. I felt like, honestly, I'm not someone who has a sense of worth. And no one should respect me because, my dad has already embarrassed me a lot. And so that is what I struggled with as a young man growing up. And so that kind of got into my mind, and I ended up having a belief system and a perception that is based on negative values, what we would call vices. And so until I came to a realization that this was really draining my life, my energy, my everything, that is the time I started working on myself and changing. And so what I'm trying to say is that the experiences that we go through, we can actually use them to define who we really are. So how do values come in such experiences? I haven't, for example, the experience I've given, my belief as a young man growing up is that dad is like a god, is the strongest man, is the best man. And so when I see the best man, the strongest man, the one who should encourage me, the one who should give me a sense of worth and belonging, when I see him in that kind of deplorable situation, then I start having conflict within me. Did I possess right values about my dad, or was I wrong altogether? Now, I go to school and I hear other children speaking about their loving dad, their present dad, who is constantly there. So as a young child, what am I feeling within me? I'm feeling like what I have is not the best. And yet, part of my values as a young man growing up is that I want to have strong values like, values of love, values of care, values of support. If I'm not receiving all this, I'm being neglected, then I start having the mental struggles within me, which comes as a form of a value conflict. And so that's why when we talk of values, it's very essential. But there are other people also who pick values from a particular experience. Maybe you failed an exam. And so what you look at, when you're defining yourself, you define yourself as a failure. Now look here, you failed just one exam. And probably you didn't even take time to evaluate a little more and see, really, why did I fail this particular exam? What really happened? Maybe actually you were sick. Maybe you are going through a lot at home. Maybe your parents were not in good condition. Maybe you got yourself into substance. Maybe you were in a relationship that broke a week or 2 days or a couple of days before the exam. And so you realize your mind was not fully into your studies, into revision. And so you realize your mind also was constantly away, out there, thinking about, the relationship, wondering whether if I get back home, will I find my parents together? Will they have separated? So you worried a lot. Maybe you're sick and you're worrying, what will happen to me? What is going to happen with this sickness? And so we thought that you're not able to focus fully on your studies. And therefore you failed your exams at that point. And failing your exams at that point does not mean you are entirely a failure. But the moment you conclude that I am a failure, you've picked a negative value, and that negative value is what will define every other aspect of your life. Why? Because the value is in the mind. The value is not in the experience. The value is in the mind. And wherever you go with your mind. So when you try to get into relationships, your mind tells you you're a failure. When you try to start a business, your mind tells you you're a failure. When you try to pray and have a very wonderful relationship with God, your mind tells you you're a failure and God will not even hear you. So when we assume that we are failures, then that value that negative value is replicated or is cast in every area and every aspect of our life. And if this is the case, then we carry negativity wherever we find ourselves. And so that's why it's very essential to make sure that the values that we have the right values in our lives. And that is what brings about our identity. The third thing that actually we use as well to define ourselves is the values that we have picked from a particular experience. Let's say, for example, growing up, you grew up in communities where people were fighting. And so you grow up feeling insecure. And so all along you can't settle down. Wherever you find yourself, it's like you're feeling like you can be attacked anytime. Or people have been through traumatic experience. Maybe someone went through rape. And so all along, every time you see a man or you see a woman, whoever was involved, what you see is actually a state of danger. Later on, you want to have intimate relationships, strong relationships, lasting relationships, long-term relationships. But you realize you're struggling so much because what it is that you went through defined you, defined your future, defined your life. And so that's why it's very essential that actually we assess what kind of values do we have as a moment. So we'll take a very brief break, and then from there I'll come back and pick from here so that we can continue with this conversation. Meanwhile, if you have any question or even any comment, feel free to reach out to us, and you can do that on our Facebook, and probably also will be guided more on what other aspects, what other approaches that we can do to reach out and ask questions or even comment.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Silas Kirinya, for that, because most of us are always struggling with that, getting to identify who we are, getting to define ourselves. Is it due to what, maybe because of what we are attached to? or as you've explained, maybe at given points of our life, something negative happened. So you find yourself calling yourself maybe a failure, attaching that kind of identity to yourself. Well, yourself, I mean. Well, still on Radio Maria Kenya, Nairobi. Okay. How do you always define yourself? That is a key question that you need to answer. Feel free to share with us and also to participate along, because this program is meant for you and your feedback.